Welcome back, everybody, to our series with many names. This is week... Oh, I know what week this is. This is the week that my director, producer, designer, engineer, sound engineer, everything has decided to fly the coop for a few weeks and go spend some time in Wisconsin with her grandparents. She's going to go look at 4 new walls, different than the 4 walls she's been looking at for the last couple of months, and we won't begrudge her that. Although you are going to have to deal with me for a little bit, but I think you're going to enjoy what I have for you today. Okay, more good news. This is also the week, tomorrow the 6th, where we will be opening the Community for Better Living Center again on Saturday mornings. We'll be there from about 10:45 tomorrow until about noon. Starting slow, work our way up, and we'll be having a live discussion about some of these things that we're talking about tonight. Though if you're seeing it here, you might have missed the first one, but we'll be there from week to week now, going forward. All right, so here we go. I've got a little presentation that I put together for you. I do have to ask that you give me some lenience on this, as it turns out Talia is also the best. Talia is the only artist, perhaps, in our house as well, and so the depictions you're about to see are not particularly representative of the people that are talking. I am aware that I am anything but bald on my head, but it's the best I could do until Talia gets back and fixes it for me. Okay, so enjoy the video. I'm going to pop in at the end just real quick to set up a couple things for you going forward. Thanks much. A few years ago, I was speaking at a retreat of sorts for outside-the-box church thinking. In between sessions, a line of people had queued to speak privately with me, and as I worked through the line, I began to realize that some of the struggles some people had in understanding were due to the simple reality that they did not recognize God as the same person I was showing him to be in the study. This was a shock, as it was all so plain and simple to me. I was just leading them through the story of Christ, showing what he was doing, and asking us to do as his followers. This was a first step basic workshop. Nothing too deep or crazy. It's not that these people were bad Christians or hadn't read these stories before. It just struck me that they had never connected with them the way I was sharing them now. How can this be? This brings me to the first point I'd like you to catch today. We, you and I as humans, tend to picture God in our own image. Your idea of God may look like an old man, though I'd imagine his ethnicity matches yours. He would act very much like your religion suggests he should act, and that would be that. As such, when reading stories in the Bible, you will be very likely to identify with the ones that speak to the God you've created in your mind. They would match your doctrine and fit all nicely into a tidy package. The things that do not fit into your tidy package would have to either be ignored, explained, often in a web of complexity that would make string theory seem elementary, or, and most likely, simply not recognized as having been part of the story at all. If I'm being honest, I've rarely spoken at a conference where people don't know me without having someone point out the reality that I've just quoted or read something in the Bible that they've never seen before, though they certainly read and even studied that particular story many times. Please understand, I'm not saying that I have it all figured out, quite the opposite. The reality of me speaking to a group and being challenged with sharing things that people have never seen before likely just exposes the fact that had they been speaking, I would have been the one being shown things that I'd not seen. And in fact, I've been in that exact position more than once. I've just begun to realize just how big of a mess this is creating. With 6 major denominations representing around 33,000 sub-denominations, making home to about 37 million churches housing something north of 2.3 billion individuals according to Barnett, Johnson, and Pew Research, Christianity alone has us swimming in different versions of God. When we take into account the very real understanding that each one of these 6 denominations, 33,000 sub-denominations, 37 million churches, 2.3 billion individuals are keenly aware of each other and founded in the understanding that they have the one true picture of who God really is,
It should come as no surprise to you that Christianity has an image problem today. But here's some good news. Once a problem is identified, we're halfway to the fix. In some ways, I've been looking at this issue for some 10 to 15 years without really seeing it clearly, and likely, so have you. In 2007, author William P. Young wrote a book called The Shack. In it, his lead character, Mac, has grown up with a father that was not very close or comforting to him. In Young's story, Mac finds himself in need of two things: an encounter with God and comfort. As such, when Mac meets God, God does not appear to Mac as a fatherly old white man. Rather, to miss the bad history, God meets Mac as a heavy-set, sweet, motherly black woman. Mac is stunned, but also comforted. Young is challenging us to recognize that God is more than our imagery. He meets us in a way that we can connect, and his intent is that we be able to connect. Point 2 for today. It's okay that we see God in a comfortable way to us. We need to be able to connect. I love the story in John chapter 11 of Mary, Martha, and the death of Lazarus. In it, we see Christ coming after Lazarus has died. He knows that he's going to bring Lazarus back to life, but on the way, he meets Martha coming to scold him for not coming sooner. Martha is a doer and a bit of a thinker. He meets her in her comfort zone, chats with her about how it'll be okay because she can hold on to his promises, and then he gives her some work to do. As he continues on his way, he finally meets Mary. Mary is an emotionally driven person. As he meets her, she falls into his arms weeping unconsolably, and he simply weeps with her. He's different than he was with Martha, and he's exactly what she needs. That brings us to point 3 for today, and it needs to be this close to point 2 so we don't get too carried away with the God we have created. Just because we see God in a comfortable way to us doesn't mean that's all God is, or that people with a different experience are wrong. Here's a harsh reality for you. A number of years ago, I was reading a science magazine that caught my eye because of its title. It read something like this: Astronomers note that there is nothing new in the universe. Reading the article, it became clear that there was perhaps some jest in the title, but the piece was serious in its intent. I further gleaned that though everything in space had been identified in the technical sense, about 94% of it was simply identified as dark matter, with about 6% of it actually being identified and studied. While those that know me can agree, I'm certainly no scientist. Even my 9th grade biology teacher, Mr. Smith, who strongly suggested that I choose a profession as far from the sciences as possible, would agree that understanding 6% is far from proclaiming there's nothing left to learn. Before you get too smug, let's consider the reality that Christians the world over have been running around telling people that they know everything you need to know about the very being that created that universe we're talking about by speaking it into existence. And most of the Christians making those proclamations can't even agree on a few basics long enough to keep from feeling superior to one another. Which brings me to point 4. For all we know about God, there is infinitely more that we simply do not know.
And while we should never stop our quest to know him better, some humility in the reality of what we don't know would be helpful. Christ gave us the key, Christ gave us the understanding, and he gave us the knowledge of knowing that though we don't understand perfect love, God is perfect love. Let's start there. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully we've pretty thoroughly stirred the pot up a little bit here. Christ becomes the key from this point on. If you're on this journey with me, religious cockiness now should be a thing of the past, right? Interpretations of who God was when he met Moses' comfort zone should make you wonder who Moses was, much less David or Samuel, Saul, any of those other people. Their experiences should really be sort of part of the story now, and we can see that as we go forward looking at some of the things that Christ did as well. So Christ becomes really the focus. Christ is the one who showed up here and told us this is who God is, and he gave us the only keys, the only real clues that we can see and trust and count on going forward, and we need to do that. If Christ was in the world today, well, let me put it to you this way. When Christ walked the earth, there were two main authorities in Jerusalem. One was the religious authority, the Jewish authorities. I don't even count, by the way, Herod and some of those. They were more puppets or figureheads. The religious sect was power in Jerusalem to the Jews, because they held the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, to making God happy. They were oppressive. They were harsh. They wrote laws that people could never possibly begin to follow, and they were enriching themselves, and they were just bad. On the secular side, on the civil side, you had Rome, and Rome was pagan at the time. Rome was bloody and violent. Rome was terrible, just terrible at the time. There was racism. There was a phobia of people that didn't match in all kinds of ways, shapes, or forms, and it resulted in violence all the time. This was the world that Christ came into when he came. This is the world that he taught us how to have peace, not the way the world gives, but the way he gives. This is the world that he called us to be in, but not of. And I think that comment gets misconstrued pretty often as it goes forward. So often that's been referenced to say, well, we're in the world, but we're insulated from the world. And I think if you look at Christ's example, he was anything but insulated from the world. He was in the world in every sense of it you could imagine. But he was not of the world. He was of God. And he's called us to be of that family too. Which means he didn't get into their petty arguments that resulted in bloodlust and violence. He didn't get involved in their squabbling over power, or who was greater than who, or however anything like that worked. It's not that he didn't care, it's that his response was, God didn't give me that to think about, so I have no idea what you're talking about. You might check with him. Imagine that. Boy, imagine if we picked up that theme too. Now, I know there's a lot of people today who say you have to be involved, and I don't disagree with that. I really don't. I think as Christians I think as followers of Christ, we have a very critical role to play in the world today. It's one that should end often in the words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In fact, that should probably be the theme of our lives at points here. We need to teach the world that there's a better way. We need to reflect Christ into a world where people have forgotten the way things should work. And really, so often, we're expecting politicians or world leaders to fix our problems for us as if we can. It doesn't work that way. At this point in history, we should have learned a few basic, simple things. And I'm going to give you a couple of them. One, you cannot combat hatred with hatred and end up with love. It doesn't work. It never has. Ignorance can never meet ignorance on the battlefield and produce knowledge. Boy, we could have fun with these. Anger faced with anger will never result in peace. Regarding the mind, we might note that never has love been won by force or trust by decree. But that's so often what we're asking from world leaders. There's one conquering force in the world, and it's done it over and over again. When Christ hung on that cross and he looked out and he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Whether you recognize this or not, I don't know if I can say the universe because it's not big enough. The heavens changed. All of creation was changed in that moment. They recognize that there's hate on one side and there's love on the other. And that hate will drive and divide, and that love will unite and conquer. We need to be people of this world. No. We need to be people in this world, but of the kingdom. In truth, you can't make hate go away with a law any more than you can make love go away with a law. A racist will not stop being a racist due to some rules being put in place, because that's in his heart or hers. A homophobic person will not find comfort because Congress passes an act. But love can teach people a better way. Friends, I'm just going to leave this easy today, and I'm going to tell you to practice love. I'm going to ask you not to take sides in a battle where people are seeking to take both sides and pull them this way and that for different agendas. I'm going to ask you to be in the world, very much so, in every sense of the word, but of the kingdom. Thank you. I love you guys, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.